И перед тем, как я представлю нашего следующего спикера, да, то есть небольшая история, мы попросили спикеров ответить на 2 вопроса для этого представления. То есть первый вопрос был, что самого важного о вас должны узнать ваши слушатели. И Рикард ответил, что, ну, во-первых, он очень красивый и классно выглядящий. И, конечно же, еще и скромный. Rikard, I tell the answer on your questions. Yeah. 2 questions, yes. Which I asked you before, in order to present you.
Yes.
So the first one is about you are very awesome,
yes.
and very, very humble.
Yes.
И второй вопрос, да, который мы попросили также, на котором попросили ответить, да, это что самого важного он бы хотел, звук, что меня уже. Да, что самое важное, он бы хотел, чтобы вы вспомнили через год после этого доклада. Да? И основная мысль такая, что значит, существует очень большая разница между тем, что нам хотелось бы, чтобы произошло, и тем, что мы думаем, как это произойдет. Или, выражаясь в бизнес-терминах, есть очень большая разница между целями и прогнозами. И об этом будет доклад Рикарда Beyond Budgeting. Rikard?
Okay,
welcome.
Thank you very much. So let's see if I can get my slides up then. So my name is Rikard Olsson. I am currently working at a management consultancy firm in Sweden called Equinors Management. I will describe it very shortly. What I think is very good is that this presentation ties very well into Even's presentation earlier on, and very so to one of your questions, because the example I will give is actually from an oil and gas company, previously called Statoil, and actually changed their name now to Equinors. And I will actually describe also their name change, because it actually tells a bit about what they are trying to achieve. So, my name is Rikard Olsson, coming from Equinors Management. Very, very briefly, what we do is we try to challenge, involve, and realize consultancy stuff with our customers, trying to create tomorrow's reality with them. We're based out of Sweden. We work in 5 areas: construction and real estate, innovation and production, medtech, healthcare, government agencies, and municipalities and county councils. And that is all I'm going to say about the company. So let's dig into the presentation of today then. Then myself, I have a master's degree in business administration from the university in Gothenburg. And then I worked quite extensively in line management positions in the pharmaceutical industry, an industry that changed quite a lot. So I ended up as head of financial planning and analysis, and there I found some strange things. I really couldn't put words to it. I really couldn't say what it was. It was some itching things that made me not feel that my work was really uplifting or really fun. And then I met Bjarte Boksnes from Statoil, now Equinors then, and his thoughts sort of put it into context, what I had been thinking about. So then I decided actually to leave the industry and go into consultancy to actually work with these types of questions. So I'm now then heading up the business unit called Strategy and Performance Management. But from the 1st of January next year, I will actually be the managing director for the Beyond Budgeting round table. If you are interested in that, I will actually be here for the full day. You can talk about that. So I'm not here selling that round table. I will actually talk more about the Beyond Budgeting concept as from now. One of the questions we often get is when we produce or we present a case, is somebody sitting in the audience saying, oh, that's a Norwegian company and I'm from Russia. It doesn't matter for me. They are into oil and gas and we are into something completely different. They are very big and we are small. So what we're trying to do with this picture is that regardless of geography, regardless of size, regardless of what industry you're in, and even regardless if you're owned by the state or municipalities or privately held, or if you're on a stock exchange, this concept can work for you all. So you would see companies from all around the world, different industries, different sizes, and different types of ownership here. So that is very important. The concept can be used in all types of companies. And then we will start with a short history lesson. Do you recognize the two people and the one building on this slide? I would be extremely surprised if you did. You know the guy. Who is the guy? This is the first time ever. I've held this speech sort of 50, 60, 70, 100 times. Nobody has ever been able to answer of any of the people or the building is. I will actually give you a prize afterwards, because it's exactly right. So this is actually the history of the budget. The first guy here is actually an English king, Charles I or the second. I can't actually remember. So why is he on this slide about the budget? Because he's actually one of the guys that made the budget appear at the first time. He was king in England in the beginning of 1700. What happened there was that the Englishmen had started a parliament. So the parliament's biggest thing to do was to collect taxes. To be the guy or the lady to collect the taxes is not that fun. Most people do not want to pay taxes, especially not if you're a poor farmer in the beginning of the 1700s. And then you had the king, and the king did three things. He had parties, he built castles, and he made war with France. So you had this parliament collecting all the money, and you had this king using all the money. So then the parliament said, this is not very good. We just collect money, everybody hates us, and you spend it on stuff. So we need to have a contract in place that actually tells you, the king, what you can use the money for. So we build up this paper where it says you can have war with France for £10. You can build castles for £4. You can have parties for £2. But actually, you need to spend £4 on building roads and £1 at building something else, healthcare, what might be at that time point. You write that down on a paper, you have a discussion on it, and you say to the king, are we in agreement? What does that sound like? Almost a budget. So what happened is then that this piece of paper was brought from the parliament to the king in a French leather bag. And here's another question. What do you think the name of that French leather bag was? Boucher. So that's where the name budget comes from. A French leather bag where you put some papers in and brought from the parliament to the king. It's a very good process if you have people not trusting each other. The people with the money is not trusting the people that's going to use the money. Sounds very much like a budget. The CEO or the board doesn't trust the people out in the business. If you just give them money, they will do stupid things with the money. So we need to control them by having a budget. The second, the building there is actually from Paris. It's the French Parliament building in Paris. So what happened there in the end of the 18th century is that the French made this into a formal process. And they added one very, very important thing to this. They said it is much easier if we connect the budget to the tax year. And the tax year is from 1st of 1st to 31st of December. How many companies today, or any organizations whatsoever, have a budget that runs from the 1st of January to the 31st of December? Should we say 98.9% of all companies and organizations? It has nothing at all to do with the business cycle or business rhythms or how people would like to be controlled or commanded. It's just that the French government said it's really easy for us as a tax department if budgets are done for a fiscal year. How many of your businesses actually runs with a normal cycle between 1st of Jan to 31st of December? I would say none of your business starts every year 1st of... Yours does. You're from the tax department. One. Okay, but you keep the budget then, and everybody else can take it away, perhaps. The other thing that they did was they said this is a very difficult task to do. Producing budgets is very difficult. We need to get some people in to run this. So they get out what we call perhaps business controllers. You need to study 4 years at the university to be able to fill in some Excel spreadsheets. I'm not sure that is the case. And then we have the last person on there, Mr. Mckinsey, the founder of the consultancy firm Mckinsey. After the First World War, he started working with companies like Ford, DuPont, and you know DuPont, it's a chemical company, very big chemical company. And you might know of the DuPont formula and other stuff that came about there. But the one thing that he did there was creating a extremely important innovation. Everybody uses this today, and it's not very difficult. It's a 3-column where it says sort of actuals, it says plan, budget, forecast in the second column, and it says variance on the third one. Has any one of you seen a report that has sort of budget or plan, actual, budget, plan, and variance? You've seen those types of reports, have you? The variance report. And it's extremely good. It's extremely simple, but what is the logic behind it? Why do we use it? What do we want to happen when a manager or somebody in the business looks at the variance report? It's very easy. You want them to look at the line where is the biggest variance, and you want them to do stuff about that. That's what it is. So it's extremely good, but there is one fraud to it, and that is if the second line is budget. Because it's budget to truth. How do we actually know that the line with the biggest variance between actual and budget is the line where you should actually draw your attention to and do stuff with? How about if the budget is wrong? It should probably be some other line that you should do it on. So it's very good, very good. But remember, this was in the 1920s. What had happened? The First World War had ended. We had a very strange situation due to the fact of the war, how horrible that was. Manufacturing in operations became much more effective because countries needed to produce firearms and machine guns and stuff. So when the war ended, they could actually switch into doing other stuff, and much more effective than they were before the war. The other thing that happened was that there was a demand for stuff. So this was very strange. What happened was that demand was bigger than the supply. How much do you sell if demand is bigger than supply? You sell everything. So what happened is, if you just produced, you sold. All currencies were fixed, more or less. Is that the case today, or does the ruble versus the dollar, or ruble versus the euro, whatever, change almost every day, doesn't it? And especially in the world we have today. So the currency rates and the globalization today doesn't work either. And today, probably, often, supply is bigger than demand. The other thing that happened was that the volatility of people working in the factories were very low. You didn't change work. You started working in the factory or wherever when you were 15 years old because your father had worked there, and you stayed until you were 65 or 70 and retired. So labor costs were fixed. The other thing that was quite fixed, that you had long contracts on raw materials and other stuff. In that world, the budget sort of actually can work because you can have what in you talk in manufacturing is a standard cost. You could actually calculate what it should cost. And then the variance versus that standard cost of that budget was actually a good measure of you were doing good stuff or not. But everything that has happened. So the budget sort of stopped developing in 1923, March or whatever, February perhaps 1923, I don't know. So the problem is, the budget works very well if you have an inherent conflict between the parties. And we talked about trust before, and trust, this does not work with trust. You create the power balance. The French brought into the fiscal year, which doesn't actually help you with your business rhythm, and made it an administrative task. You made up budget departments, etc. And it works very well if you should have a cost control with a variance analysis and you want to have a bit of coordination. But the problem for me is that was 1923, and now we're far away along from 1923. So a little bit of a history lesson, and if you haven't learned anything else, you've learned that the French word for a small and neat leather bag is boucher. You can bring that home with you at least. So, if we continue then, we believe, and I believe, that actually beyond budgeting and creating business agility is something that we will call management innovation. So if you look at this slide, and this is actually very coherent with what you saw earlier on, you have sort of the level of innovation and the sustainability of that innovation. And this is something that we worked out in our consultancy firm, but it also is with the work on Julian Birkinshaw. So you start up with operational excellence, and even talked about that. That is lowering your cost. The problem with that one, somebody else will have a lower cost very quickly. And it's very perhaps boring sometimes. It's very non-pleasant to work in a company if cost is your only benefit. So what people do then is you do add-ons on products and services. You don't just sell copying machines, you actually come out and fill it with paper and toners. You don't only have a bank with a bank account, you have credit cards and stuff. The problem with the world today is that somebody else will probably pretty soon do that also. The next one is change the business model. And here you can think you're doing the same thing like others, but you do it in a very different way. I mean, if you look at airline industries, I don't know the name of the Russian low-cost airfare, but you probably have one, like Ryanair or Wizz Airline or EasyJet or those types of. You do the same things like the Aeroflots or the KLMs or the Lufthansas, but you do it in a very different way. You sort of create a new business model. That worked for Southwestern Airlines quite a bit and Ryanair, but after some time, it takes some money, somebody will catch up. The next part is the industry transformation, and we already talked about one of the most successful companies there, Spotify. It's very different. You actually don't own the music. When you bought CDs and stuff, you bought a physical product that you owned. Now you actually don't own your music, you only subscribe to music, and the day you stop paying for your subscription, you actually don't have access to it. Or Netflix or anything else. I mean, I had loads of CDs and DVDs at home. I don't have anything of that anymore. I, as a customer, get the same or an improved stuff, but the entire industry is transforming. It takes longer time, but all of a sudden Apple Music or anybody else is there as well. But it takes longer time. So the most sustainable innovation of all is when you get to your management innovation. That is when you have such an innovative management system, like beyond budgeting, that is almost not able for anybody else to copy it. Do you know IKEA? IKEA is all over the world, and IKEA earn loads of money. Very, very successful. But if you think about it, what is it? It's a blue box with two floors, where the second floor is you go into rooms and look at how it is. The bottom floor is accessories, and you have flat packages. And it's been around for 30, 40, 50 years. If you think about it, the innovation, the flat packages might have been an innovation in 1950s or 60s, but today it isn't. So how come that they can be sustainable forever? If you had money, we can understand how it works. We can build that box. We can just go out and buy some land, build that box, go to loads of companies that actually do furniture. It's nothing difficult or high-tech about it. So from my understanding, or my view, is that it's how they operate internally that nobody can copy. the way they work with people, systems, and everything is non-copyable. Even if you can do all this with them, you cannot copy how they work. So, technology innovation is great. Everybody's doing it. Management innovation, doing things differently, like throwing away the budget is a bit scary. Very crowded place. Management innovation is not yet a crowded place, but both have the same purposes, better performance. And I'm not saying that you should stop do your technology innovations. I think you should add the management innovation. And probably the management innovation will enhance your technology innovation. It's quite interesting if you talk to Daniel Ek and those the founders of Spotify. They actually talks a bit more that we had a management model and we found the technology to put that management model into, more or less. It's not exactly true, but they talk about it that way. So I will now then go in very quickly to the example of beyond budgeting in the old Statoil company, now Equinors. So what they changed the name for is, it was called Statoil, state-owned oil company. What they are saying is that we are now not anymore an oil company, we are an energy company, showing their agility. So that's part of taking away the oil name, and it doesn't matter who owns us, so that's why they call it Equinors. What they found out was that they had a couple of problems with the budget. It's very time consuming, stimulates unethical behaviors. I've seen this before. In my old work, we had a very strict budget and a very strict incentive programs connected to it. What happened was, and this was pre when you had all invoices coming into the system, which actually were paper copies. When a cost budget was up, and that could be mid-December everything, the manager just put all the paper copies into his bag, took them home and gave them to the accounting department 1st of Jan, so he could keep his cost budget at the exact ruble on all his lines. He got a very good bonus for that one. It's unethical, it's wrong, but it's rational. You know, he's doing the right thing from a rational perspective. If you think that I'm so stupid I don't understand that I can get loads of incentive or bonus for this one, I will actually continue to do it. Assumptions are quickly outdated. There was a survey conducted a couple of years ago where they asked CFOs, and they said, I think that the budget is out of use before 6 months have gone for the year. So 35% said that. 33% actually said, I think the budget is useless before the year even have started. Because the assumptions we used were back in May or August, and all the assumptions are now changed. So I actually can't use it. Illusion of control. And also one interesting thing, it sort of can guarantee planned cost, because you can just stop cost, more or less. It's not exactly true, but it definitely does not guarantee planned revenues. It has nothing to do with getting your revenues in place. And you can see different types of. So they had lots of problems with this. So what Bjarte and the others in Statoil quite often use is this one to understand what they would like to achieve. You know, you see this one. So you come with your car and you get one, and it's green, it's amber, and it's red. You stop with red and you go with green. Sort of like a budget. If you have a budget, it's always green. If you don't have a budget, it's always red. But who is in control of this? I mean, it's probably an algorithm or anything else that depends on whether it's red. Sort of updated assumption. How many times have you been to this when there's red and there's no car whatsoever in sight? Quite many times, and you just stand there. And the opposite as well. There is green, but there actually is coming a car or a bicycle or a pedestrian. You stop anyway, or you should stop anyway. It's not that if you break into that car or that person, you could say it was green, no problem. So what you can do instead is trying to think like this. Who is in control here? All people at the site at that time point. Based on the information that is there, you need to look, you need to be transparent, you're looking at it. It's the people there who are in charge. And then think about which is most efficient and which is most difficult. It actually has been proven that the roundabout is more efficient to get stuff going. But the more important thing, the roundabout is probably a bit more difficult. The green, red, yellow, you just stop or you drive. The roundabout, you as a driver actually need to have control, you have to look, and you have to actually engage with the other drivers. The other cars, you need to engage with them. And then which one are values most important? Trust to the other. A roundabout would never work if you didn't trust the other drivers to use the same set of rules or values as you do when you drive in it. If everybody was just, crashing into each other and stuff, it wouldn't even work. But it works because you trust each other in the roundabout. You don't need the budget, the red or green light to show you what you are doing. Does it make sense, or is it superficial? For me, it actually makes sense a bit. It's more efficient. It's more difficult. Working without budgets and creating business agility is more difficult, but creating it with more efficiency. So it's from managing performance to enabling performance. I mean, beyond budgeting is there to make you actually do good performance. It's not for me as the head of this organization to manage your performance. And that is especially true if you're a really, really big oil and gas company. I mean, the CEO of your company can no way manage your performance. 50, 60,000 people around the world, what they can do is only enable the performance. It's a very old thing that you can sit on the top and try to manage 50, 60,000 people around the world with hundreds of thousands of business decisions in a year. Just think of how many decisions are taking every day in your organizations. And those you should enable because you cannot manage them. So, just another very short thing about this. I don't know if you know theory X and Y, McGregor, 1960. Here you think that people are crooks and thieves. You need to get laws and rules. And here you actually think people would like to do good stuff. Otherwise, you have a stable environment or a very dynamic environment. We've agreed to that we have a dynamic environment today. And if you believe that people are actually wanting to do good stuff, you should do it. What is the most easy way to never have any people stealing stuff in the world? It's to get everybody into jail. But in society, we don't put everybody into jail. We put the guys who break it into jail. We can still fire the guys who are breaking it that don't work in an ethical way, but we don't put everybody. But with the budget and how we rule companies, we say we need to command and control everybody, because I guess there's one or two in this room that could probably do something bad. So we inhibit all the other 99% of you from doing that by having command and control. So what is this then? It's combining the non-traditional detailed budgets, much more relative than directional goals, dynamic planning, holistic performance evaluation, and on the leadership side, values-based autonomy, transparency, and internal motivation rather than external motivation. So that's the business agility that we want to create with the beyond budgeting concept. I won't go through these one. These can be found on home pages, and if you read books, 12 principles that will try to do it. I would guess that the presentation is available. I see many people photographing. I guess they're available to you. Otherwise, just go into bbrt.org and you can read them. Because we would now go in then to the Equinors case, and I'm behind schedule, but I will catch up. I will try at least. So you see, quite big companies, 33 countries, $80 billion in turnover, gas and oil company all over the world. So it's not a small company that they're trying to do this. So the first thing they did was to separate the budget into 3 distinct areas: targets, forecast, and resource allocation. Today in many companies, that is the same process and the same number, but it actually is conflicting purposes, because the target is what we want to happen. The forecast is what we think will happen. And if you haven't learned anything else today, I think that is so important. There is no thing like a stretched forecast. There is no thing like a forecast where you actually say to the CFO that I'm going to achieve this forecast. Forecast change. It's what we think will happen. That is very different from what we want to happen. And the important thing is to find the gap between the two, so that we can put in corrective activities to make sure that we at least get as close as possible to the target. You see what I mean? How often have you heard from your manager saying that forecast has not enough ambition into it? That is not a stretched forecast. That is to say, like the guys presenting the weather and it's going to rain tomorrow, say, can't you do that weather forecast a bit more ambitious so we get sun? It won't get sunny tomorrow, even how much as your manager try to do it. The targets can be ambitious, but the forecast need to be dead right on spot on where the assumptions is today. So, targets can be inspiring and stretching. Have you heard about VUCA, vulnerability, uncertainty, and so robust? Forecasts need to be unbiased with expected outcome, limited details, and the resource allocation to it needs to be dynamic, KPI target, mandates, decisions driven, and trend monitoring. This is very important. So what they've did in Statoil is actually to separate these 3 processes. And that's often what I go in when I talk to companies, helping them out to set a optimal target process, an optimal forecasting process, and an optimal resource allocation process as 3 distinct different processes. They call it ambition to action. In Statoil, it's translating strategy, it's securing agility, the room to act and perform, and values and leadership principles are very important. I will not go through, but they start then with strategic objectives. They identify the risks. They do actions and forecasts, and actions are more important than the forecast. They will measure progress, and then they will try to evaluate on an individual and group basis. So this is the actual document. They call ambition to action. So what they have is the strategic objectives, the risks, the action, and the indicators. It's a one-pager. The very important thing here, there is no process for anybody higher up in the organization to say yes or no to this one. Each manager looks at the ambition to action document above them in the chain and say, can we use this one? Or do we need to translate it into something that is important to us? Of course, they cannot change the strategic objective, but everything else can be changed. There's no process that the manager says yes or no to another manager's ambition to action document. So they have sort of 600. The interesting thing then is if you go to the lowest level and you try to sort of calculate upwards on numbers and stuff, you cannot do it. Because they will not align, because they are translated. The measures are translated. If the measure above me is not usable for myself, I create another measure. So you can never sort of add it up mathematically. You can add it up on a strategic level, it's the right things to do, and the actions are there to do. So it's very important. It's through translation or not cascading that it happens. The last slide then is about how they then look on performance management. So what they do is you work both with your ambition to action card, but you pressure test it. What happened throughout the year? Was it easy to achieve? Was it hard to achieve, etc.? How ambitious was it? Risks, blah, blah, blah. But you also, which is very, very important, How did you achieve it? Did you do it in an ethical way? What happened with your staff? What happened with your customers? And what types of values are you actually doing? So everything is a 50-50 on the what's and the hows. Very important. And no, of course, no personal incentives, only group incentives. If you would like to read more, I mean, there is an extremely good book with Bjarte. This is sort of a second or third version of it. That one is focusing on the Statoil or Equinors and another case that Bjarte has been part of, another chemical company called Borealis. The second book is actually from a colleague of mine. It will be released next week or in 2 weeks' time. That is much more loads of different examples. I would guess 20, 30 small examples all over the place, but they are very well connected. So, that was all. So if you want to talk more about Beyond Budgeting Roundtable, getting more stuff, you can look at the website to talk to me afterwards. How many minutes late was I? 4 minutes late. I usually get 10, 15, or 30 minutes late. So that was a personal record for me as well. Should we? So I guess you've got some questions. This was a live example of what they are trying to do in a very big company. So it's actually getting the way from the comfort zone that you as a leader on top actually can manage performance. What the only thing you can do is build processes to enable performance. And that is so scary for many managers, because they have come to their CFO or CEO positions by being the best in their high school, the best in their university, they've worked their way onto the top, and they should know it all. Because it's a bit of letting loose. And not the lit, it's very much letting loose and enabling it instead. Yep.
Вопросы, ребят?
Yep.
Мужчина в рубашке первый был.
Can I speak? Okay, right. So thanks. It's my first time I'm in the round of beyond budgeting topic. It's very interesting to look at that perspective of trust.
Yes.
And I wish to go to this level and empower instead of manage.
Yes.
But how you think it can go up level in big enterprise organizations? Because it feels to me very hard if you don't have trust initially with budgets and P&Ls and all of that.
Yep.
How this thing will go up if I'm a middle-level manager?
Yes. Okay. So I think there are two things that are very important here with the beyond budgeting concept. One, you can actually start very small and we've seen companies said, okay, we will only change, hard processes, the forecasting process or the target process. We will not talk about values and stuff, but we will change the process so that we make sure there is trust. We're right now in discussions with Volvo Cars. They had, if they took last year, they had probably 6,000 sort of units that made a budget. For next year, it's 80. So they're taking away stuff in the system to make just 80 people in Volvo Cars. So they have 60, 70,000 employees will have a budget next year. That is a way of saying you will not, as a manager, have time to do budgets below. You need to just trust them. You need to send out some targets and then let them go and find the right KPI. So sometimes you can actually start with doing it the process way, the hard way, to enforce it. The other way around is if you go the trust way. It will be extremely difficult if you don't have, and we've said that earlier on, the board and the stuff. The higher up it gets, the easier it goes. What we've seen, for instance, it sometimes is a bit more easier to do in privately held companies rather than on the stock market. Because the principal agent theories is that, the owners of the shares don't actually understand the business. So what we need is loads of financial details. That's how we create this sense of control. But if you understand the business very well, we can actually let go a bit. And I think the trust word is very, very important. There is actually a very interesting thing going on in Sweden right now. 3 years ago, the civil minister or interior minister of Sweden actually set up a delegation called the Trust Delegation. This is state. This is not a privately held company. That delegation worked for 3 years to say, how can we build in trust much more into the state government? Because we measure loads of stuff, we have loads of budgets, but we lose the the people that within the profession. And in the state government, you have loads of people with high education, everything from doctors to people, engineers, and loads of stuff. And we get them into this system that we take away everything they learned and put them into boxes. Very, very interesting. So if you can read, most of it is in Sweden, but the trust delegation in Sweden, a very interesting way of how you can work with trust. Trust is so important to make this work. And sometimes, I'm sorry, for me it's a bit strange. You hire very smart people, you pay them loads of money, you actually send them out to business meeting customers, developing your stuff and so on. And then you don't trust them that they should, if you don't have a travel budget that has a restraint on it, you actually think that these smart people just go berserk and travel all around the world and go to parties and buy drugs, or I don't know what you think they're going to do. Just say, and Volvo is another thing. They had a travel policy of 27 pages. You know, loads, if you go this way, you're going to use this ticket and blah, blah, blah. Then you have one line, travel responsible. And we will, by systems, help you understand how you can travel responsible. So now they have a very good IT system that would help them to see, if you go from Gothenburg to Shanghai, where they do very regularly these days, if you order your ticket in this time frame before you travel, it's half the price if you book it too late. So they say, if we give these smart people the tools, they will travel responsible. I don't have to tell them, don't go with this one, don't go first class, go business, or go economy. I mean, they're not stupid people. And if you believe that they are theory X and Y, that they would like to do good things for the company, which most of us actually probably would do, why restrain them? Do you have travel policies at home? To your wife or your husband or kids and stuff? Kids, perhaps. You don't have. You trust them, of course. So why don't you trust? Why can you be trusted at home but not at work, where you're probably even more professional than home? So we had one more question. Yeah.
You mentioned IKEA company,
yep.
Flat packaging, two-story buildings, and you mentioned that it is possible to copy flat
yep.
packaging. It is possible to copy two-story buildings, and yet no one was able to successfully copy their internal
processes.
Their internal processes.
Yep.
Why not?
Because if you think about it, I think what from the outside, I think there's loads of stuff, and I think we have an expert on IKEA here later on, so you can probably learn more. First of all, IKEA was started with one guy, a very visionary guy that actually just passed away half year ago, 90 plus years old. There was a vision from the beginning. And very important is that they have worked with things that can seem to be what I call the loose or the soft stuff that is really hard, how you work with people. So most of the people working in IKEA has actually been, if you're a manager in IKEA, I can almost by certain say you actually started on the floor in IKEA. They very rarely hire from outside. And it's the same if you look at Handelsbanken, a Swedish bank, it's the same. Because what they say is that if the thing that we have that is very different is the culture and the values, not the skills of being a banker or a furniture guy, we can't bring people in from the outside that hadn't lived and felt for 10, 15, 20, 30 years how we do stuff. That is how we do it. So we don't hire people that is 55 with a good reputation or a good CV. We hire people from the floor that gets to be store managers or regional managers or country managers and stuff. So that is one thing. They have worked what we call soft stuff as a hard thing. The HR or the people processes is so important. And what they all been very good at is connecting loads of people. The CEO, the CFO, the HR manager, the development guy is working as one team. It's not separate things. I think that is the case. Very shortly. I mean, if you want to learn more about IKEA, I mean, we have the right person here. And if you want to learn more about Handelsbanken, you should actually learn about it. Extremely interesting bank. Also with no budget since 1970s, and has been the bank with no budgets that has been the most profitable bank in Sweden for 40 plus years, and the only bank that has never ever gone to the state and asked for money, although the crisis in 92 or 2008.
One more.
Nope.
I think that's all. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.